Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Second Chance Stories of Young Offenders. We're your hosts, Calista Lynn,
And Akshay Keshri.
and today we've got another inspiring story for you guys.
Actually, Calista, we don't have one, but two awesome stories today.
Wait, really? Who?
We're so excited to introduce you to someone who not only works with juveniles at a youth center after serving time in prison, but even found his calling through art by forming a hip hop group to make music during his sentence called the Lifers Group.
We also have a transformative justice advocate and Rutgers Camden School of Criminal Justice graduate who leads the Transformative Justice Initiative, empowers communities, and fights mass incarceration, emphasizing education and equity.
We're beyond thrilled to introduce you to Maxwell Melvins and Antonne Henshaw. These men have faced severe adversity head on and emerged as a beacon of hope and creativity. Thank you both so much for joining us today. Maxwell, do you prefer to be called Max or Maxwell or anything like that?
Well, whatever you want to call me, just don't call me late.
So sounds good. Okay, let's start from the beginning. Can you both tell us about your rough childhood and where you grew up and the environment you grew up in?
No?
Go ahead, Uncle Max.
All right. Yes, Maxwell Melvins. I grew up in Camden, New Jersey. Um, right next to, it's right across the bridge from there. I grew up in an area of crime-ridden, the normal crime-ridden, drugs, a lot of criminal activities, and all types of things like that. My childhood, I was in the streets as a little kid and everything, and I pretty much wanted to see the other side. So growing up as a kid, I lived on the other side of the bridge, which is Rutgers College, as a matter of fact, where he attends right now. Was the first time I was arrested, and I was arrested as a juvenile because I enjoyed going around Rutgers as a teenager at age 13 to see the beauty of it, the tennis courts, the swimming pools and everything. And I actually got arrested for trespassing for doing that. But, roaming the streets and everything, I eventually started hanging around with, some of the guys. And I was, persuaded into using some drugs and trying out drugs. And it progressed as I got older. And I got myself into some trouble. A gentleman tried to finagle me out of my money, and we got in a confrontation, and I actually started arguing. And as a result of that, my best friend, my childhood friend, was actually died as a result of that incident that night while I was sent to prison.
I'm so
I'm
sorry.
so sorry to hear that you've been
Yeah.
through such negative experiences in your childhood.
Oh,
Um,
yes, many.
yeah. Are you comfortable with sharing like your experience like from the whole process, like from the trial to actually being in jail to the risk of death penalty to parole and then finally getting out?
Yes. Well, you know, as I say, originally that night I didn't know anyone had actually gotten hit that night by a stray bullet. When I learned I had went on the run, when I did find out, I was informed, and I informed the person was on life support, and I learned who the person was. I turned myself in, and when I turned myself in, of course, I was denied bail. I went to the county jail until I went to trial. The victim's family actually came to court for me and everything, and told my side of the story. And you know, I lost the trial. I was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison because I left the scene of the crime. They said, that it showed an intent, a state of mind that I was in, you know. So they sentenced me as knowingly and purposeful murder for those reasons. But in actuality, it was because it was an election year, and it was a crime-ridden city, and the victims had become so overwhelmed with the crimes that had happened in that area was a high drug risk area. And I was the straw that broke the camel's back. They were tired of it. So the citizens took to the street and they burned the bar down where it happened at. So as they burned that bar down, that drew much more attention to the street because there were actual protests because of the crimes happening in that area. People took to the streets, blocked the streets and everything. And so that didn't help my case at all or in any way. And, like I said, I went to prison at the age of 19. I started off my sentence in Bordentown. From Bordentown, I was shipped to East Jersey State Prison, which actually was called Rawway Prison at the time, is where I began to serve my time at. And while there in prison, serving my time, I continued to be involved in different things inside the prison and everything. But eventually, at some point, I came to a halt of everything. And I said, something, this can't all be bad. Something good has to come out of this. And in honor of the victim and my friend, I wanted to do something and kind of like look through his eyes in a way because of who he was. He didn't live the life I lived. He was totally the opposite of me. He was helping people out in the community, working at the community center. On the other hand, I took to the streets more. So I started working with the Rawway Lifers group, and as a result of that, in them times, everything was changing, and as times were changing, I had to do something differently to reach our children because they weren't getting the message anymore. So I came up with the concept of, doing an album in prison. So that's where it started with the music project.
That's amazing.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, that's where I came up with the concept of doing the music. And I brought in, I met a gentleman by the name of Funky Klein, who was with Hollywood Records. And, we started from there exchanging, letters and different things. I brought it, everybody thought I was out of my mind when I said I was going to do an album in prison. Like really, they thought it was a joke. But as they saw it progress, and then when I got a letter from the Walt Disney Company, from Mr. Michael Eisner, the president of that, it was a different story. You would have thought I was the man, that way everybody wanted to be a part of it and everything. So they started believing it. And, from there, the record had gotten a lot of exposure. I started to get a lot of letters from parents and children of telling me, that they didn't want to end up where I ended up. They didn't want to end up in prison or anything. And they wanted to thank me for my efforts and what we were trying to do with the music and all. And from there, it reached phenomenal stages throughout the world. It ended up being nominated for a Grammy, something that I never anticipated, against Billy Joel, Peter Gabriel, Sinead O'Connor. And of course, Madonna walked away with the Grammy. And, I continue to do the work, that I was doing in there. Hey, it was a nice thing that we were nominated, but that wasn't the reason that it was done because we had no clue of that.
Yeah, so and I can tell that, I can see that, from the negative experiences that you had, you tried, as best as you could, and you were successful in turning all those bad situations into, a positive experience, and something good came out from that.
Yes, I've attempted to in many ways, and I still try to do and continue to do that. And, like I said, the more letters and things that I got, the harder I tried, because when I started receiving letters again from parents and children telling me, the impact that it had on them, I just couldn't believe that I was me for the first time in my life. I was having that type of positive impact on people's lives. So that inspired me more to get involved. And I said at all costs, I would do everything that I could to make the project successful, against even threats against my own life, of people who wanted to become a part of what I was doing and that wasn't really allowed to do that. I've been threatened and everything, just people who wanted to be a part of the project, and, the warden had some faith in me because he allowed me to do that, allowed us to do that. So as a result of that, that's what it turned out to be.
I mean, that's amazing. I can't fathom the idea that you started a hip hop group in prison. But going back to that specifically, what does can you drop any bars or can you rap it if you're comfortable doing so? And who have you collaborated with? Who are your rap influences? Are you comfortable sharing some lyrics?
Yeah, I'm not actually a rapper myself. I mean, I actually write poetry mostly, but actually one of my verses was on that was I used to have a name, but now I got a number. I used to put suckers 6 feet under. Now I'm in jail, no longer a rebel. You can't tell me a damn thing about the ghetto. I've been there. Now I'm in the belly of the beast. And what I meant by that, I was literally, putting people, pushing them to the side and everything. And like some of the stories and different things that I was hearing from the guys that you can't change or whatever. Well, the streets is this, the streets is that. Look, I don't want to hear nothing. I've been there myself. I know what it is. And I know that change is possible in anybody who eventually wants to change, you know?
Yeah,
But
and I think that's actually really inspiring too. Just like I know like so I'm in music myself, right? Like I do a lot with piano, and I like know from like firsthand experience that like music is a really it's a form of communication that like is really just it means a lot and it expresses a
It
lot as
resonates.
well. It
Yeah, it
resonates with
resonates.
people, like no matter what language you speak, it connects people. So I think that really is something very special.
music is universal. It's universal and it has no color. Everybody, like you said, everybody can relate to it when they hear it. Whether I'm gonna give you an example. Look at Michael Jackson, for example, when he went over to Japan and different countries, they didn't have a clue of some of the words he was saying, but you heard how he was screaming and jumping up for him and falling out and everything once they heard his music. So it goes to show you the impact that music does have on people. And like I said, music changes lives. Music saves lives. It tells of different times in your life. It tells stories, whether you're sad or whether you're happy. It tells you a particular place you was, a time where you were at, a person you might have been with, good times or bad times. So yes, music is a very beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm gonna jump to Antoine, just because I'm curious. But Antoine, can you share about your childhood and your experience? Did you grow up in similar situations as Maxwell?
Well, it was a lot worse by the time it got to me. Max, that's why we call him Uncle. Max was good friends with my father. Um, and Max, you watch me grow up, but the world was entirely different by the time it got to me. I grew up in the same neighborhood that Max did in North Camden, and I always used to go to the same college that he got arrested at as a summer program. And I promised my elementary school teacher, Mrs. Fenderson, that when I grew up, I would get a degree from this school. Lo and behold, we moved from North Camden to East Camden, and on the way to school every day, we had to fight. Because I wasn't from that area. I didn't grow up in that area. And it was different crews: Carmen Street crew, 27th Street crew, 28th Street crew. It was just so many different things. We were poor. Poverty was a motivating factor. There was a lot of trauma. There was a lot of violence. And it caused me to disassociate from a lot of things. Um, I remember a guy was with a bunch of girls one day when I think I was about 12 years old, and they were making fun of my sneakers and my clothes. And all the girls was around him because he had on at that time. I don't know if you guys know what shell-toed Adidas is, but the shell-toed Adidas was the top of the line sneaker back then, like Jordans is now. And yeah, we had Filas too. Filas was the one later on in hip hop. It was a premier sneaker, and I
I'm wearing
started.
a Fila shirt right now.
I'm looking out. That's when I looked at the shirt, I was like Fila, yeah. Um, so it my it, that humiliation, I used that as a justification to start selling drugs. And I remember at 13 years old, the older guys that were in their 20s and 30s paid the guy that I looked up to kill me at 13. And he couldn't because He knew that he was the person that I loved and I looked up to. This guy named Lou Rivera. He was a boxer, and I wanted to be just like him. And I would do anything for him and help him, whatever the case may be. He was struck with a cocaine addiction, and rather than see him get in trouble, I would give him cocaine for free and make sure that he would always pay me back. And that was the guy that they paid to kill me. And from that point on, could you imagine at 13 being marked for death by older guys and sending someone that I trusted to kill me, and he couldn't do it. And up until that point, I had never had a gun. But my first guns that I ever brought was the 3 guns that they gave him to kill me. And from that point on, I was a fighter and I never had guns, but when the guns entered into the community and the gun play, it changed how we interacted with each other and how things, how they move forward. 17 years old, I was with a crew of guys, and we went to a rival area to look for a guy that owed one of the guys us some money. Got into an argument with another guy, and an innocent man lost his life. I wind up going to trial and losing a first-degree murder trial. Never been in trouble before, never been in a juvenile facility like Uncle Max. And I was sentenced to 30 years to life in prison. I left in 1988. I went straight to Trenton State Prison. I didn't go to a boarding town. I didn't get to go to a youth facility with no prior experience with incarceration. I went straight to the worst state of New Jersey. I was 5'4", 118 pounds. I didn't fit this to survive, but I got there, and a lot of older gentlemen saw my youth as an asset. Though I was thrown away by the state of New Jersey, they invested in me, helped me get myself together, focus on education, start working with youth that were coming into the prison through the Support for Kids at Risk program, through the Hispanic Americans for Progress, Jesus Sanabria and Hector Sanabria. They were the Sanabria brothers from Paterson, New Jersey. My prison father, Mr. Jerome Perkins, who was from Newark, New Jersey. And they just started investing in me and pouring in me. And I couldn't understand it because I was so young. And I would always ask them, why do you care about me? And why do you care about what I do? And they would always tell me that I was different. And I didn't see that I was different. I just felt as though that I got caught up into something that I wasn't a part of, sentenced to life in prison, and that if it was a possibility that I would never make it home, I would probably die in prison. But they didn't see that. So they began to teach me how to live and how to survive in that system. For 3 decades, I went up for first eligibility in 2018. The worst experience that I ever wanted to experience in my life. The parole board was grilling me for 3.5 hours in the very visiting room that my family would come to visit me. I wind up gaining my release in 2018. I came home June 7th to a program and got out of that program after 90 days, September 5th. And I've been home doing a bunch of things, working with a lot of people. I work with youth on a daily basis. I'm a senior coordinator for evening weekend reporting. Most of the young people that I work with are justice impacted and are in a detention alternative. We keep them from violating the conditions of their release, making sure they attend every court date. And then we go on with a follow-up to make sure they successfully complete parole or any disposition that they have. The hardest part to this is getting systems people to really understand that you really have to invest in young people, because we often feel at that age that older people do not understand what we're going through, cannot relate. I'm one of the coordinators. I'm a lead credible messenger with Uncle Max for the state of New Jersey. And we do our credible messaging format and all the jobs that I have. I also work for Rutgers Youth Success Program. And I do a lot of work centered around youth and emerging adults, as well as adults that are returning from incarceration or helping to keep them out of incarceration. And I use what Uncle Max described in a lot of the stuff that I learned from him in the Lifers group when I got to Rawway, and those techniques to be able to relate and be able to intervene and interrupt a lot of the cognitive dissonance that goes on, the cycle of retaliation, the trauma bonds, so much stuff that goes on. But the main thing is to link up with a young person and become relatable and learn them like we want them to learn the things that we learned. So in the end, for me, I'm listening, I'm obedient, I'm in my purpose, I'm doing what God has called me to do. And so far, it's been working. Uncle Max, he'll tell you from where I came from to where I am now, becoming selfless and a major contributor to helping systems understand what we go through as young people and trying to face the world that we don't feel like we belong in is one of the hardest things. How to help people exist through their traumas, through their pain, and most of all, through their grief.
That was so beautifully well said. Literally goosebumps. I think your story is amazing, honestly. And Callista and I actually, and the rest of the board members of this podcast actually are part of something called Peer Diversion Court, also known as Youth Court. I don't know if you have in New Jersey, but basically we represent young respondents rather, or we represent the community prosecution in real life cases too. And that's the same thread that we've seen as well. And I know going from completely innocent to being the subject of a trial must have been horrifying, and getting someone trying to kill you, and that whole experience must have been mortifying. Can you talk more about that? And also your experience with the trial specifically?
Okay, so one of the things is that with the attempt of my life, I didn't feel like there was because it was adults, it automatically caused the trauma loop that I didn't trust any adults. I only trusted people young like me. And knowing that they probably didn't understand, I centered my thoughts around, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die with a gun in my hand. Right? But that's what trauma does. It distorts. It makes you believe something that isn't really real. Well, in my case, I can't speak for all cases, but in my case, I use that as a means of overprotecting myself and thinking that violence was the only way to do things. And I hung around people that felt the same way. And the trial was, before I got found guilty, I knew I was going to get found guilty because of how they were handling the case. And I remember telling my father and my grandfather that the lawyer was selling out and that this is what he was doing. And one of the key moments in my trial was the day before trial, before we were picking the jury. There was a list of potential jurors, not the jurors, potential witnesses submitted by the state. And the person that they were claiming that was going to testify was not on that list. And we walk in the courtroom, and I remember having a meeting with my attorney the day before, the next day when we walk into court. And I'm like, well, he was like, well, I think you should plead out. I think you should do this. I said, I'm not pleading out for something I didn't do. And he was like, well, they got an eyewitness and saying this, and he's pointing you out. And I said, well, how do they have an eyewitness and that witness is not on the list of potential witnesses submitted to the court? and approved by the judge. The next morning, we walk into court. The prosecutor made a motion to amend his potential witness list, and I looked at the attorney and I said to myself, I wonder how he knew that. That would have been an automatic mistrial if they'd have let that guy testify and not been on that list. So, and my father and my grandfather, and it's hard on my father. Even when I came home, I remember being in the doctor's office because even my incarceration caused a lot of trauma, like medical neglect inside. You don't trust medical professionals, and I remember him going to the doctors with me when I first came home. And this man was a complete stranger. First time I ever seen him. And my dad told the doctor, he said, yeah, my son did 30 years because I didn't listen to him and get him another lawyer. And like for years, I never thought that my dad would say that or thought that or held himself or my grandfather responsible for me going to trial and losing, and then facing 30 years. But the hard part of it is that the trauma of that experience is not over because I'm on parole for the rest of
Yeah,
and
I
it,
think
it
you're,
continues.
yeah, I honestly, it's really like disheartening, like just hearing about how the criminal justice field and system like failed you. It makes me kind of sad because I know this happens to so many other people too, including you, and it's just like it just makes it so frustrating because I feel like your voices aren't heard and like whatever you say people don't take it into account. And that's just like one of the like saddest things um in this. But your mission includes changing how Black folk and youth are represented visually in American art and media. Could you elaborate on why this mission is so important and what progress have you both made in achieving it?
So for me, mine's is using art, using music. That has always been a positive outlet and a means of survival, even while I was incarcerated and doing this work. So when like people don't look at public speaking as an art form, right? They don't see it as that. But when me and Miss Uncle Max go to these places and stuff like that, if he do spoken word, or I'll just do a monologue, right? I don't rap anymore. I don't perform. I don't play drums and stuff like we did when we were coming up and going through the system and using music as our outlet. I remember while being incarcerated and I was in isolated confinement, I had to write um, a verse just to keep my sanity, right? Just to maintain my sanity, to repeat it over and over again. They had me in what you call investigative detention, and they kept renewing it with extenuating circumstances, um, circumventing my due process rights. So they said, we're still under investigation. The circumstances are extenuating. This stuff we got to find out. And I wind up staying there for 6 months with no human contact, with no disciplinary charge, never being written up or anything. They were just investigating. And that's in itself illegal. But just writing lyrics about books that I read would keep me okay. It would keep my mind sane and things like that. So I heard y'all ask Uncle Max to spit a bar. So the bars go, Dr. Ben in the pen, then in came Clark. Professor Rogers on the left flank ignited the spark. Dale Jones in the war zone is on forever. Cousin Akbar was sub-bar, but got it together. It's all good in the hood when I kick it to cheap hood. Dr. Finch make mad sense, but decoy's good. Uncle George waged war at them Highland camps. I hope the children of Chancellor Williams continues the big dance. Brother will talk about it. He ain't scared. Seldom seen, I can't dream, subconscious dead. Pass the ball to me, I'm going to pass it to Ashby. Hilton would have killed him, but some of that shit passed me. Now, when I'm saying that, right, now you wouldn't know that those are all books that I read. Those are all authors. And I would constantly say that over and over 10, 20 times a day to remind me was that the stuff that Uncle Max and everybody else was giving me to read, right, was still in me.
that
That was
you spit those
amazing.
rhymes. That was so
Yeah, like, I
good.
was gonna say that too. That
I
was
was like, that's
incredible.
tough. That was
I was
pretty tough.
vibing
That was
with
pretty
that.
good. Same.
But, so would you say that music and this form of art is really what carried you through this whole negative experience in prison and incarceration?
It was one of the main influential things, music and art, because how do you, in a place, in essence, like, and I try to help people really understand that you're living in your tomb, like you're dead, right? And you have to come up with creative ways to 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 not be dead, to not live your death, to not fulfill someone else's destination of your body. So it is through art, it is through creativity that you become alive and that you maintain and say, I'm here, I matter, right? And then going before people who are going to judge you, and then that you have to ask for permission to be allowed back into society, right? That's an art form. That is some kind of form of creation, and that you can't fake your way through it. You can't manipulate your way through it. You can't force your way through it. You have to be genuine who you are, knowing that you can't control the outcome.
That makes so much sense, because you do have to be who you are. And I have especially noticed in the ghetto neighborhoods and low income families and areas, it's hard to get out of the situations. It's hard to move up in class. So one of my friends is from Brooklyn and she lives there, but she knows that her city is just really dangerous to live in. And she can't even walk in the streets at nighttime without being scared. And it's hard just to progress in general. So both of your stories are testaments to both of your resilience and personal growth. So, what are each of your thoughts on future goals or aspirations? And what advice or messages would you give to people who are living in those neighborhoods and facing adversity? So, Maxwell, you can start.
Well, I'm just gonna say, I tell a lot of them, shoot for the stars, right? And they'll land on the moon,
Pop Smoke, yes.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? But to keep up, to be persistent, right? As in myself, I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know how I got that project done from where I was, but it was something that was inside of me that said you're gonna make it happen. It was just something, I don't just know what it was in me. I didn't know what gave me the drive to say, dude, you're gonna make this happen. And out of all places, it was inside there, and I was able to make that happen. So if you believe in something enough and you have faith and you keep going and you keep working hard for it, you're gonna get through it, you know? But you have to want it. You have to want it. You just can't, like sometimes we find ourselves in situations we don't think we're gonna ever get out, right? But we got to be persistent and to keep on, to never give up, and to never give up and keep going. And eventually we're going to overcome that whatever that is that we're doubting about ourselves, you know, to be better, even if it's something that affects us in a very adverse way or something. For example, you got things that happen to people that, for example, I'm gonna give you, say for example, if I saw some kids out there and they were like snatching a woman's pocketbook or something, right? For an example, or something to that nature, and that could have, I would be very upset and angry, but the angriness would cause me to inspire to me to want to do something positive to prevent something like that of happening to our elders in our neighborhood or something like that. That's just an example, So like your friend, like you were saying earlier, that how difficult it is for them to even function in school and stuff, just going through everything that she's going through and walking in the neighborhood that she's walking in, that when she come in, she's like basically shot. But like I say, to keep her head up and, do whatever she needs to do to get through it, you know? That's just my advice to her and anybody. Anything you believe in enough to keep going for it, eventually it's going to happen for you.
How about for those specifically who are either in jail or the youth specifically that are suffering these circumstances from the environment around them?
What? Say that, repeat that again.
Oh, no, no. I was just saying specifically for the youth or people who are growing up in that environment, how do you get out of it? I know you said work hard, play hard, and all of that, but specifically, what steps would you take?
mean, like I say, some of the youth aren't old enough to be out on their own, to go out or even out on their own, right? But you got to start from here sometimes. You got to look at the situation that the youth are in, whether they're home, what's going on in the household or whatever. A lot of them don't want to be in the situations in the streets the way they are in the streets, but you don't know what they're going through at home, how it can be much worse there. For example, like adverse childhood experiences is pretty much put a lot of them in the situations that they're in right now. And whether it's seeing their mothers being abused or whatever, it angers them. They don't want to be around her. They might not want to be around her mother's boyfriend or whatever. So they roam the streets and everything. Again, that could be a motivation for them to get out of that situation or to, something that's happening like that. It could motivate them to do better or to seek help or something outside of themselves because sometimes they can't do it alone. They need support and they don't always have that support. And our system isn't always there for them to support them, to guide them through. And a lot of them want help, but they don't know how to ask for it. Also, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you you have to, like they really don't know how to ask for help.
That was
Mm-hmm.
really inspiring. That really was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of youth can really like benefit from those words because a lot of them don't really know what to do at this point and they might feel like lost or misguided. So yeah, that was really helpful. What about you, Antoine? Do you have any last things you'd like to say, any advice or messages that you'd like to share?
Me, it's what we call a community thing, right? Um, Adults sometimes have to learn what young people are going through. Like I'm a student, right? I'm a student of the world, and it took me losing everything in order to fight to gain back my life and putting my life back piece by piece. Um, and for young people, with so much pressure on them to survive in this world, social media, your life, people not liking you, being trolled. Like I couldn't imagine what that's like if you don't already have an identity, right? So I would stress, identity, learning your culture, becoming resilient, um, and really developing the what do you call ID? I don't I don't give a F attitude to a lot of stuff. And it's hard, because of the social pressures that young people have grown up with and gone through. One of the biggest things that I'm learning from young people is that the adults that are supposed to be helping them do not understand them. So there is no relationship. So what we call in our movement, real relationships, right? Getting down and really learning from them what they're going through. So to teach them how to navigate systems. So, and becoming more important, like, I didn't have a me growing up, somebody that I could go to. And I look at what I've been through as a means of saying, what would I have wanted when I was going through all my trials and tribulations as a teenager? And what kind of adult, setting boundaries and limitations on what I could do and how they would help me. But more importantly, teaching me and myself how to love myself. A lot of this is about people not knowing who they are, not knowing how to love themselves, not knowing how to receive love, and being able to identify what love is. They can tell you what pain and hurt and damage and all of that is, but then they become skeptical when they see me and Uncle Max coming, and we're coming from a place of love, and we have to fight through all of that I just described to get them to the point to say, I'm not one of those. So when I walk in and we doing mitigation for a young person, Uncle Max and I was talking about a young man that I was working with. He has been 9 bench warrants issued for him. All the programming, none of it worked. And through our federal messaging network, the lawyer had me go back into the holding area where he was, and I met him. And the guy had his hand broke, and he had pins in his hand, and he would take off his cast, and he was in pain. And they had me read a file, and I never read case files because case files, based on what they're writing in these reports, will jade you when it comes to a young person. I want to meet the person. I want to feel the person and the energy, and I want to get to know them. But this particular day, I read it. I read the case file, and the kid, he he was in pain, and in the case file, it would talked about his grandmother and his grandfather, and that's when he switched. He went to the street. And when I walked in the case file, it had his grandmother's name, Patricia. And he had Patricia tattooed over his eye. And that, to me, was a signal. That's how much value she was in his life. He tattooed his grandmother's name on his face for the world to see and over his eye, which he identified with. And I told him that I could help him get out, but he had to do something for me. And he was tearing his cast off as a rebellion to the authorities. And when he got angry, and it was adding pain to himself. So he was harming himself as a means of resistance to corrections, juvenile corrections. And I said that if I help you get out, I said, you have to do something. And he was like, and I said, and we just met. I said, the next time we come to court, I will speak on your behalf if you put the cast on and leave it on.
And remind him, Tone, he also wanted to be a barber.
Yeah, he also wanted to be a barber. And he came in with the cast on, and he talked to the judge. The judge had never heard his voice. So I'm telling them from this one meeting with him, I was saying, well, if you could do something in your life, what would it be? He said, I wanted to be a barber. So I work for Rutgers Youth Success, and we have mentor and internships. And we could get him a paid internship to become a barber and then become a licensed barber through this paid internship through Rutgers University. And I told him, I said, that's an easy fix. We could do that. But I need you to show me you're serious, have the cast on. And when he walked in there with the cast on and talked to the judge was like, I don't know what you do or how you do it. She's like, I've had this guy in my courtroom 9 times and I've never heard his voice. And she asked in open court, what do you do? Like, and I'm sitting there saying, like, if we are going to make an investment, we must require an investment from our young people in return for that investment. If they feel like they're working for something and it is valuable, and then you have what you call tangible things that you can exchange, right? All he had to do was put on a cast, and I'm gonna get you into a trade and get you home. And he kept his word. Nobody has ever demanded that he kept his word. But more importantly, I said, you're in pain. He was like, how do you know that? I said, because your grandmother's name is over your eye. And he said, how do you know it was my grandmother's name? I said, because they gave me a file and I read where you, where your transition from, he was a star athlete. He was recruited in the 8th grade for D1 colleges. And and his father and his mother did not understand. It was losing his grandmother and not being able to grieve properly that caused his divorce from being that upstanding young man that he was in society prior to that. And he chose the street after that. And once we got him back on track, and me and Uncle Max was talking, and he was like, because I don't read the file. Uncle Max was like, what made you read the file? And I said, I've never went into the back and talked to young people in court while they were waiting to come from detention. And that was the first time I ever did it. So I wanted to be prepared with the information. And in that information was the solution to this young man. And he's doing well. He's out in the community. When he goes to court, just like this is a whole different person. But it's going to take us as a community to reach into these young people and pull out the greatness that's in them, even when they can't see it, and guide them towards themselves, building themselves, and what we call upward mobility. Poverty is man-made. It's not a death sentence, right? We choose to play, we choose to participate in it, or we choose to resist it. Some people don't know how, but those that know how have a duty to teach those that are trapped in this so-called fixed cycle of poverty how to do what we call intelligence and economic liberation from the cycles of poverty. And that's what we're working with these young people. And they're not just them, but their families, to get them to the point where we want to be free. We have to be free in every phase of our life.
A few months ago, I worked on a case with this kid who was in dealing THC, weed, and arms or guns, weapons. And I noticed this too, is that he said that he was doing it for his family solely. And that's just, it breaks my heart, you know, to know this is what's happening. This is the state of the world. But I so agree with you. And everything is changeable, you would say. Um,
And yeah,
and
like sorry, I just wanted to say like I love like the positive impact that you've had on others people's life. And I love the fact that you're so dedicated to like this mission because I think you've helped so many, like even though you've shared like one or two of your stories, I personally believe that you've like helped so many people and like I so appreciate that. And yeah, it's just so commendable.
Thank you.
But yeah, I just wanted to thank both of you for coming on to this podcast as guest speakers. And yeah, to the listeners, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of A Second Chance Stories of Young Offenders. Until next time, remember that your story is still being written and that there's always hope for a brighter future. See you guys next time.
Peace.
nice.
Wait.
All right.